What's going on, everybody? We are live right now from downtown Austin, and going to give this a couple more minutes since normally when we start these streams we have the kind of early roll thing playing before we actually go live. So I'm going to give this a couple minutes, let a bunch of people jump in. If you have questions that you want to ask me about pretty much any topic across the board, really this is kind of more of a casual stream, feel free to drop those questions down in the chat. I am monitoring the chat here, so I will be able to answer them. But yeah, we're gonna kind of hang tight for another minute. If you've, like I said, if you got the questions, drop them in the chat, and then we should get started in another minute or so. Like I said, this is going to be a bit more of a kind of casual-ish stream. I'm pulling double duty today, working on some recorded content, but still wanted to be able to actually get out and do a bit of a live stream with everybody. So we're using the GH5 Mark II. I have it tethered to my mobile device, which everything seems to be working just fine for network connections and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different take than our normal streams. We may not run the entire hour, but while I'm out here doing these, I wanted to make sure we give an opportunity to address a couple questions that I got in through the last week, but then also be able to address questions that y'all might have while we are able to do so. So let's see, I see Pete is here. Welcome, Pete. Good afternoon. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever y'all are joining us from. Let's see here, who else? To my Lumix and Linux is like name brothers. What about Lumix Tether for Linux? I have gotten that question before. It is something that I have asked our team about. I don't know if Linux specifically is a version that's going to get the Lumix Tether software, but it is something that I can bring up more and more to our kind of my counterparts in Japan and the engineering team. Let's see here. Good afternoon. So yeah, we'll give it a couple more minutes. Normally we start these at 1 o'clock. Like I said, this is a bit of a different kind of setup since we start these when I'm using the remote streaming. It usually just starts right up, so we tend to not always have the opening slides. But yeah. Again, welcome everybody. If you have questions about anything on our cameras, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. This is a casual Ask Us Anything stream for today. Hopefully my audio is coming through good. It looks like it is on the computer and everything, and I am actually going to darken this down just a little bit. Looks a little bright on the screen. So, let's see here, 12:58. Yeah, this looks about good. So yes, everybody, those of you that have been here already, welcome to LUMIXLive. These are weekly broadcasts that we do on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. And yeah, these are just specifically designed for all of you to be able to have an opportunity to ask us questions, to hopefully learn a thing or two about some of the ways that you can use your Lumix camera. This is a bit of a different stream if you are joining us for the first time. This is a remote stream. We are using the GH5 Mark II, and I am wirelessly streaming this out through a mobile hotspot from downtown Austin while I'm out here creating some other content for future Lumix live streams, and then also some training content for just the products that we've got out, different features. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring up while we let some more people jump in, and again, if you have questions, drop them in the chat, I want to remind everybody about the Lumix Pro Services. So we have Lumix Pro Services here in the United States, and we also have it abroad in many other countries. It is a program designed to support your camera and your ability to be actually out there creating content, photographing everything, video, whatever it is that you do with your camera. You want to make sure that you have a support system behind the equipment that you're relying on. And in the United States, that comes in two different programs. We have the red tier, which is free and available to anybody that purchases a new Lumix camera. So we have a link down in the description where you can take a look at that. That gets you your three-year manufacturer extended warranty. So in the United States, comes with 1 year out of the box, but then you get 3-year once you register on Lumix Pro Services. And it also gets you access to the portal, so in case you happen to ever need to send your camera in for service support, you have a platform to do that. You don't have to go through the general general consumer electronics portal for servicing. But if you're someone who likes to use your equipment a lot harder, or you rely on your equipment to the point where you really need that, kind of full-blown support in the back end of loaner equipment, things like that, make sure to take a look at the Platinum Series, the Lumix Pro Service Platinum Series here in the United States. It is a paid-for service, but that gets you 2-day repairs with next-day shipping both ways. Loaner equipment, if the equipment happens to be taking much longer than the 2-day repair time where available. You also get a membership hotline where you can reach out to someone actually over the phone and speak to them if you have service-related questions, as well as you get things like lens cleaning, sensor cleanings, calibrations, all that kind of fun stuff to keep your equipment in the utmost highest quality shape that you can have it. So again, links are down in the description if that's something that you're interested in. Again, Red tier, if you own a Lumix camera and you're here and you have a camera, definitely go check out Red. It's free. It gets you that service. You don't want to just leave a 3-year warranty on the table if it's available to you for free. If you're not joining us in the US, we have links in the description for the global portal. That's got access for the different countries that are participating at this time, so you'll be able to see which programs are available in their regions as well. So let's jump in and take a look at some of the questions and comments that have come in here. Let's see here. Is it too big to ask for a new firmware for the GH5 Mark II with high-resolution photo mode? So, not necessarily that it's too big. You can always ask for firmware updates. We always ask for firmware updates. We, as in Matt, myself, a number of the other team, we always want to see as much stuff as we can have get added to these cameras. Some cases it does come down to that there may be hardware limitations. Some it may come down to that just the processor just doesn't have enough power to it, or in some cases it may just be something that wasn't thought of as being important into that particular camera for its design and feature set. So that helps us kind of evaluate and go back to our engineers with things that y'all are asking for to see if it's something we can add into the camera. So I know that's a bit of a roundabout answer. There's not really a clear yes or no that I can give you, other than with the GH5 Mark II, I would pretty much kind of doubt that the Mark II would get high-resolution shot mode, primarily for the reason that the cameras that do deploy our high-resolution shot mode, like the S series, the GH6, and even the G9, do have higher rated stabilizers than what the GH5 and 5 Mark II have. So that very possibly could be a situation where you're looking at hardware just may not have the required capabilities to do it. So we'll definitely ask, but there's no guarantee on some stuff like that. Let's see, what else? FC says, if a battery is removed from a camera, how long will it take before the internal clock, the camera resets? Also, what other camera settings can be lost? So, I've never actually timed this one, FC, but I know that in a lot of cases you don't necessarily, like if you're going to put a camera into storage for a really long time, yeah, you don't want to store batteries in any electronics. I think that's a fairly safe comment for any kind of electronic that uses removable batteries. So for that one in particular, the time between you taking the battery out and the camera losing the internal settings like the clock, stuff like that, it's going to be quite a while, depending on, obviously different kind of conditions. Do you have is it a warmer condition, cooler condition, stuff like that? So all internal batteries, all batteries in general react differently to thermal. I've had batteries out of cameras for, maybe about a month between like different trade shows in some cases, and I've not run into a situation where I've had to reset anything in the camera. But something that everyone should know is that when you do drop a battery out of a camera, the primary thing that the camera will lose is the clock, and usually not the region, but most likely the clock setting, which can cause some challenges. Things like streaming, if you're using a GH5 Mark II, stuff like that. If you want to use the Wi-Fi functionality, you do want to make sure the clock is set. It's usually a fairly straightforward procedure. But outside of that, I haven't noticed anything major get I haven't noticed anything else major actually like kind of lose from the camera menu and systems. If you've got like an S1 and you're someone who's got the V-Log activation, or you've got a GH5 and you got the V-Log activation, you're not going to lose that unless you really let this thing go down and for some reason like there's a fault causing the camera that you have to send it in for repair. But yeah, it's usually not something that people really need to worry about too much. And even that, the chances of it happening are so slim. But if you ever do leave a camera without a battery in for an extended period of time, and for some reason stuff like, all your settings disappear, all that kind of stuff, that's a good practice where if the camera that you're using has the ability to store settings to an SD card or into the mobile app, which you can do that in the mobile app as well, it's always good to do that before you're going to store a camera away for a while. This way, in the off chance that something does happen, you can just reload those settings right up and then you're good to go. But yeah, as far as things like V-Log, I wouldn't worry about V-Log if you're on one of the cameras that needs the activation code for it. Let's see here. Interceptor, welcome. How's it going? I'm glad you were able to join. Let's see here. Hi, sir. In Lumix S series, in the future, possible to change focusing system like as strong as face detection? Well, we've commented on the focusing systems that we use. We are using the DFD or depth from defocus system in our current generation of cameras that you see on the market. We have commented that we are always evaluating all options when it comes to focusing systems on the cameras. Right now, the DFD system is what we are using. So really kind of apart from that, I really don't have much else that I can kind of add to that conversation other. Okay, so I should be back now. This is one of the downsides of where I've had to set up for my stream is a little bit of interference in my area. But anyway, what I was saying is with the with stuff like the focusing systems, we are always evaluating focus systems, so your feedback is what helps us develop better cameras in the future. So if something does come up, we'd obviously let everybody know. But yeah, at this moment, it's the DFD system that we've been using for quite some time now. Let's see here. Pete says, what are you using for today's live stream? Lumix Tether via laptop? No, I'm actually using the GH5 Mark II. It's direct streaming functionality. So the way I have this stream set up is I am USB tethered into my mobile device, and that is using the 5G network, which right now, because of the interference where I had to stop, it bounces between 4G and 5G. So I'm using that setup right now to use my mobile device as a hotspot with the Lumix networking software, which is what I use to pull the stream key and the stream URL down from YouTube. So I have my laptop here that I can just monitor questions, trigger the stream live. But outside of that, it's totally independent, not using anything on the computer other than just the YouTube backend to start and stop the stream. So if for some reason the stream drops, I do apologize. Like I said, the location where I was able to get everything set up in usually has better cell service here, but today it's just seems to be bouncing back and forth between full-blown 5G and 4G. So let's see here. Andy says, let's see here. When using the Ninja, I check my settings and they get displayed on the Ninja for recording. Okay, so for Andy, one of the things that you would need to do is, as far as if you're recording externally for things like RAW or just using an external monitor, you want to disable HDMI info out, and that will make it to where the external recording is not going to be recording any of the UI in the settings there. So when you do need to check your settings, it's going to pop up on the camera screen, not on the recorder screen over HDMI. That should fix any issue that you have there. And then the follow-up question from Andy was, can we have the option to disable some audio channels on the GH6 recording? I can ask about that. I don't know. I know that you get 4 channels, so you get 2 that have audio and 2 that don't. So I will have to check in that. I know that there are a lot of cinema cameras that do operate that way when you have 4 channels of audio. So some of this just might be feedback of having to get our engineers some more information as to how people are using these cameras. So we'll definitely ask. I don't know if that's something that we'd be able to do quickly, or if it's something that's kind of embedded with the way the audio channels are written into the video files. Let's see here. Brick says, you registered your GH6 in March but didn't get a CF Express card. Check with the Lumix Pro Service team, Bricks. If you're in the US, the Lumix Pro Service team is who is basically kind of validating and making sure and getting those things out. Check the spam folder in your email to make sure that there wasn't a communication that came through maybe that had some questions or requests for more information. So yeah, take a look at a couple of those things, and then if all else fails, we have an email address that's down in the description that you can shoot an email to, and then we can also check from our side as well. Let's see here. DJ Electric says, it seems as if S1R's high-res mode is using electronic shutter and not mechanical, since there's no shutter sound. Is that correct? If so, what's the reasoning for it? Yeah, so that's actually a good question. So, high-resolution shot mode, from my understanding, in every single camera on the market that deploys a high-resolution shot mode, uses the electronic shutter for a couple of reasons. So, for one, the mechanical shutter, because you have to shoot upwards of 8 to 16 images, depending on what camera you're using, the mechanical shutter just, in most cases, will not fire fast enough to freeze the motion in each shot and give the actual the time distance between every frame. It just doesn't work that way. So electronic shutter is used in these modes because it's a near instantaneous read of the individual images. Because that sensor has to move anywhere between 8 to 16 times for that image to be able to actually have the information to compile for your high res. When you're doing the 8 images, so like the S1R, that will do 8 images, and then it's a 4 times resolution increase over the sensor. So you have a little bit of a difference there. In a camera like the GH6 that has handheld high resolution, that one can use up to 16 images for it. So it's going to depend. Handheld high res needs more information to also kind of help counteract any kind of hand motion in the image. So you have a little bit of a different system there, but all of them are going to be using electronic shutter for that. It's faster, and it can keep up with the time duration that's needed between every single one of those 8 to 16 images. Let's see here. Chris says, just got an S1H. Any tips on settings for, let's see here. Any tips on settings for special features? Coming from the S1 and the S5, filming weddings and interviews. It kind of depends. The S1H in this case, sorry. If you are filming content that your clients are going to need in multiple different deliverables, one of the things that I recommend a lot of people doing now, especially with the advent of cameras like the GH6, is to shoot in what's called open gate, or in some of the other cameras it's just called anamorphic. Now on the S1H it's a little different because the S1H's anamorphic is a Super 35 region for anamorphic, so that it falls in line with what optics are available for anamorphic. But the S1H does have the capability to shoot 6K at 24 frames per second, so that will use the full sensor height and width. And the purpose for this is so that you can have 6K of resolution, punch in your 4K, UHD or your 1080, and you can have room to pan and scan with those images. But then you also have enough resolution for a client that may be asking for, say, like a vertical cut for social media or stuff like that. Even if, especially in weddings, even if, say, the bride and groom aren't necessarily asking about social content cuts of their footage, we all know that everyone loves to share their content, their, a day that they're super happy about. So a wedding, birthdays, sporting events, all that kind of stuff. People love to share content. And if you're someone who's able to offer an output to them that your competition doesn't, you're more likely going to get that, especially if you can end up being able to show them that, look, I can shoot, say, the ceremony, and you've got your 16:9, so our traditional way of thinking and video delivery, but hey, by the way, here's a vertical 9:16 of, the putting the rings on, or, the kiss, or even in the reception, like the first dance, here's a vertical, ultra high quality that you're able to then kind of use, not necessarily as a marketing tool, but yes, as a marketing tool. You're able to provide them something more that other experiences and other wedding and event videographers and photographers typically aren't thinking of. So using the camera, shooting open gate is, let's let that motorcycle go by. Using open gate, I think, is probably one of the biggest things that a lot of our cameras and a lot of the newer cameras are starting to really offer filmmakers and wedding and event videographers that we typically didn't have before. It's just a slightly different way of thinking. So that's probably one of my biggest points there. The other one is that if you're doing a lot of setup shots with the S1H, you also have the access to focus transition. Focus transition lets you go in and program in 3 points for a repeatable focus pull. So if you were trying to add some B-roll of say, like the wedding rings, or if it's like a sporting event and you're doing like kind of a highlight reel, really kind of anything. If you're trying to add that B-roll and you want to like get that perfect rack focus, you can do that with the focus transition in the S1H as well. It's a really fun feature. So those are my two. If you want to check out more about that, Chris, we do have a bunch of other videos. I'll look to see if I can get them tagged in this video when it goes up. I just have to remember which ones, because I know when we launched the S1H, we talked a lot about some of those different little features. So hopefully that helps. Let's see here. To my another want to have in the GH5 Mark II, autofocus on touch, drag and drop AF point in manual focus mode. Right now, have to confirm the point with a joystick or use the AF on button. Yeah, that's one of those. That's one of those changes that has happened over the years between the cameras. The vast majority of user feedback that we had received with the original system, which was where if you're in manual focus and you move the focus box around, when you let go of that, it would focus to that point. We got a very large number of users that actually reported that as being not as great of a deal because of the instance of accidentally touching the screen, moving that focus box, and then focus being shifted, even if all you're trying to do is just move that box out of the way. So we can revisit it. We can bring it up to the team and the engineers. What I do know is that a kind of compromise in that particular operation is that on screen you do have the AF button as well, which when you move that box and then just tap that AF button on the screen, that will do pretty much the same thing. It's slightly slower than the other way, but it does the exact same thing. So you don't have to necessarily use the joystick or the rear AF button. Let's see here. Martin says, what does the Lumix and Leica partnership mean for us? So for those that don't know, there was an announcement made at this point, I think it was a little over a month ago, might have been a little bit longer. There was an announcement made about the L² technologies, which is an announcement made by Leica and Panasonic about the kind of future collaboration between the brands around technologies. Really what it means for you as an actual user of the equipment is better innovation, kind of newer technologies coming out that are just better. And that's about the best way I can describe it. Outside of that, there's not much info that I can share. Even if I did know more about it, there's not much that I can really kind of shed light on in that particular case. But over time, I think it'll become clear what L squared technologies means, and we'll be able to get some more info out to everybody. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Let's see here. Chris says, does the battery display on the top of the S1H and S1 drain the battery when the camera is off? I mean, any, as I just ripped my microphone off, any display that is on in a camera is going to pull some power from the battery. So it is going to drain a little, but in the times that I've had my cameras, which all of the S-Series cameras I've had since before they even launched, I've never run into a situation where I've actually noticed any kind of battery drain from using those screens. And I have them enabled on all of my cameras that have screens on them. I would say it's probably about, it's less than what you would have if you have Bluetooth connected for things like geotagging and stuff like that, where that runs in the background, and that's already a very low energy draw. So I wouldn't really worry too much about it, but that can be a situation where if you know that you're going to be storing your camera for, say, like 2 weeks because you're not going to use it, yeah, probably take the battery out, put it on charge, make sure you get your batteries charged up, all that kind of stuff. I usually am a kind of overly careful person when it comes to batteries in the cameras and battery drain. So no matter what the environment that I'm going to photograph in, whether it's casual or I'm getting paid to do it, I'm one of those people that will take everything out the night before, lay it out, charge all the batteries up the day before, and then go out and shoot. But within, like, say, a given week of shooting, you'll never notice any kind of battery drain from stuff like that. So let's see here. Where do we go? Bricks, do you have the email address? Yeah, the email address is in the description of this video. You should see it. If not, I will drop it at the end of the stream as well. Let's see here. Where are we? FC, no, never tried it. Right now I have some issues with Darktable. Oh, okay, yeah, that was one of the questions about the software not opening your files, I believe. Where was that question? Yeah, where was that question? Okay. Some issues, Darktable, open source, cross-platform, and GH5 Mark II refuses to open the raw files. So with Darktable, it's possible that they just haven't updated their raw depository, repository of what the raw files are. I know that programs like Lightroom, anything that runs off ACR, what is it, Skylum, all of those programs all work perfectly fine, and they open the raw files fine. So that is going to be a very specific thing for Darktable to figure out. Best to reach out to Darktable and ask them what's going on with raw support for these stills. FC allows Linux to control camera. Oh, okay. I think I'm jumping back and forth between a couple of different things here. Let's see here. Oh, actually, something to point out about the control stuff is that, so with a number of our cameras, we do have the Open SDK on how to control the cameras over USB, that anyone that wants to write a program for Linux could write a program for Linux. It's just a matter of if any of the major manufacturers you think are going to create it themselves or add the support, but support is there because we do have the open SDKs. They are found on our websites, so just so people know. Let's see here. FC, if you want raw processing in Linux, heard Darktable and raw therapy. Raw therapy, I believe, does work. A lot of times, though, as FC is pointing out, if you use something like Adobe's DNG converter, that will maintain things like color profile and stuff like that. It just converts it to a DNG, makes it a little bit easier to work with in different programs that may not support the RW2 files. Let's see here. Albert, hello. Yes, we are outside for once. It is approximately about 101 or 102 degrees down here in Austin. But we're out shooting and still wanted to come out and bring a stream to you. Let's see here. Chris says, filming an open gate, does IBIS still work? Is it just electronic IBIS that shuts off? So when you're using open gate 6K recording, the mechanical IBIS does work. I believe, I have to double check, but electronic I think does disable, because electronic requires the system to crop in to then move the pixels around. So if you're shooting with the full 6,000 by 4,000 resolution on something like an S1H, there's no other areas there for that. So it basically, electronic stabilization's probably just not going to work. But yeah, your standard stabilization works perfectly fine. And for a camera like that, it makes sense if you think about it, because these are photography cameras as well. And stabilization works just as good, if not better, in the photography modes, because one, you're not rolling, at minimum 24 frames per second of footage. So yeah, it does work perfectly fine for 6K open gate. It works perfectly fine in the GH6 for the 5.8K open gate. Yeah, just gives you a lot more flexibility to work with the files in post. Let's see here. Let's see here. FC says, is it possible to extract RW2 raw images from ProRes video? Not that I'm aware of. ProRes RAW is a video RAW codec, and that's owned by Apple. That's why it's run in things like the Atmos Ninja, stuff like that. So still raw files are very different. You're looking at, I think the best way to describe this would be closer to the comparison to Cinema DNG versus, the kind of, ProRes RAW or Blackmagic RAW. ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW are compressed RAW formats. Cinema DNG is an uncompressed, pretty much, RAW format. So you're working with, pure raw data. RW2 files or regular raw still files are anywhere between 14 to 16-bit in most cameras. Some cameras, older cameras, will be 10-bit. It just depends on the generation of the camera that you're working with, 12-bit. So 12, 14, or 16. There's infinitely more data that's there in a still raw file, so converting from a video raw file's not gonna really do anything for you. If anything, you actually have similar-ish capabilities, because you can edit that stream of ProRes RAW in something like Premiere or After Effects, stuff like that, and you are able to use that as a kind of as a raw file, because you can export things like a TIFF. You can export things like a TIFF or a PNG or a JPEG from the video files, and you're going to get how you've edited it and work it out that way. So a little bit of a different way to work, but it is somewhat comparable, even though you don't have the major control that you have over something like an RW2 or a DNG. Let's see here. Andy, yes, I wanted to make sure I answered your question, Andy. Sorry I didn't answer before. Why is focus peaking on the external monitor weaker than on the screen of the camera, using a GH6 with a Ninja 5 and a Shinobi? Focus peaking is going to depend on the pixel density of the display that you're using in some cases. So one of the questions that I get a lot is, why is it that as cameras are getting newer and newer, focus peaking and stuff like that might seem to be a little bit harder to view on some of these newer cameras? And a lot of it does come down to focus peaking being designed, based on image information. And when you go to a really high pixel count, small screen, you can run into some challenges where the pixel density is so high that one pixel, or if you're using our focus peaking system and you're adjusting it to be less sensitive, the width of the pixel area, or what I like to kind of bring into like more of a Photoshop sense, but like the feather of where the actual line of pixels are that are in focus, is only so big. And when you start having to work with much higher resolution, those pixels get harder and harder to see on a given screen size. So as we're making these higher resolution screens, in some cases it gets harder. That being said, if you're using something like port keys or video assist or a Ninja series product or anything like that that's got a relatively high resolution screen, I will almost always, actually pretty much always, recommend use the built-in monitor's tools for your exposure and your focus and stuff like that. 9 out of 10 times, you're going to be working with things like focus peaking. You're going to be working with a system that's designed for the screen and the operating system that monitor uses. So it's going to be calibrated differently. The data is still there, so you're not really going to have any kind of issues in that sense. But the usability is going to be a little bit easier. And a lot of times monitors have more options for focus peaking, like the Atmos Ninja 5 has a number of different focus peaking modes that you can use, some of which are super useful, others maybe not so much. That all just depends on your use case. So if you are using things like focus peaking, turn HDMI info off completely and use the tools on your monitor. If it has it, you'll find that the results across the board typically tend to be better. Especially if you're using things like Vlog and you want to send out an image over HDMI that has the LUT applied that you're working with, you want to use the monitor's waveform to judge that exposure, because if you're using the internal waveform, your waveform is built for log at that point, not the LUT you're applying to it. So your external monitor, when you throw a LUT on it, is going to use the information that it's getting over HDMI, which is log with the LUT applied, to give you an understanding of how that exposure looks when it has that LUT applied. So a couple little things just keep in mind there. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question there, Andy. Phil says, I love my EVA 1. They have zero delay on HDMI or SDI. Does the BS1H have low to zero latency, or is it similar to the S1H? The BS1H HDMI latency is very similar to the S1H latency. Same with the SDI output. I think one of the things to remember is the BS1H is a cinema styled camera. It's much more cinema camera and kind of multicam production camera than it is a kind of hybrid mirrorless camera like the S1H and all of our other cameras are. So slight little differences there in what is being used in the cameras. However, with cameras like the S1H and the BS1H, if you are recording out over those ports, one thing that you can do is turn the HDMI audio off, and it will reduce latency for recording externally or sending out in a live production sense. So that's something to take a look at. See if when you turn HDMI audio off, if the latency feels much closer to what you're seeing in the EVA 1. So. FC says, TIFF might be okay to extract from ProRes RAW. Yeah, TIFF will be okay to extract from a ProRes RAW file. You've got enough data there for it. Even though TIFFs, can be up, around 16-bit, you can still do a really high quality output from a video file. The one thing to obviously just keep in mind is with video files, you've got motion, and you're usually not recording to stop the motion. Unless you're doing like super slow-mo stuff and you're shooting at like, a 45-degree angle. So you will have more instances of things like motion blur with the images. But if you just need a quick still from it, yeah, I do it all the time. I pull TIFFs out of my video production when I need to be able to show something is happening. Even at like 24 frames per second, it still works fine for me. You just have to pick that moment that you're not either moving the camera or your subject's not moving all that much to make sure that it's kind of like, sharp enough, since 24p does tend to be a bit softer. Let's see here. Sacred says, awesome, we're outside now. Yes, we are. Cameron says, show us your motorcycle. It's over that way. I'd have to turn everything and point it over that way. Let's see here. Phil says, thank you for answering the question. Of course. That's exactly what these streams are about, is just casually, hanging out, answering questions, and hopefully getting you guys some answers that, you're looking for. Andy says, will the GH6 be Netflix approved? Thanks for all your help, Sean. No idea. Manufacturers don't have say over that. Despite what I see articles being written about online about, oh, you got to pay for this. No, it's not how it works. I'm sorry. If a camera is requested and wants to be in the system, or if a manufacturer, I believe, can ask, but it's totally up to Netflix whether or not a camera is going to be in that system or not. We don't really have much to do with it. So, yeah, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It fully depends on the team over at Netflix. Let's see here. Martin says, what's up with DJI joining L-Mount Alliance? Why? That sounds like a great question for DJI. The L-Mount Alliance has grown a lot since it was introduced with Leica, Panasonic, and Sigma. I believe as of right now, it's Leica, Sigma, Panasonic, DJI, and Lights. So Lights Cinema has also joined the Alliance. Every brand has got their reason for wanting to be in the Alliance. There's a big benefit of this entire system, whether you're using a Leica, Sigma, or Panasonic current generation camera that has access to well over 100 native L-mount lenses for the system from varying different manufacturers and varying different price levels. Any company that wants to actually, that was a fly. Any manufacturer, I guess, that wants, potentially sees value in it or wants is going to potentially ask, and that decision's ultimately up to, I believe, Leica and the Alliance members. So, yeah, it's cool to see companies like DJI join in with the Alliance. It's also really cool to see, a top-tier cinema brand like Lights join the L-mount as well. It just means better things for the future, more cool stuff to come as these different companies start to develop and, potentially build things on the mount. That's kind of the point of the Alliance, is that you've got different camera brands all excel in different areas on a unified mount that allows you to be able to interchange between these. So say Sigma has a lens that you really like and we don't make it. Well, you know that the Sigma is going to work fine on our camera because it's built in the Alliance. It's built based on the specifications for the mount and the control. So it makes it just a really solid kind of environment. And yeah, again, seeing DJI join, it's awesome. Reasons behind it? No clue. You'd have to ask the respective companies about that. Let's see here. DJ Electric says, still begging for Lumix gear, shirts, or anything. I know. We are now starting to get back to more and more events and stuff, so maybe we'll start having some more stuff that we can share with shirts and stuff like that. Let's see here. Sacred says, do you like running Dtap with a cage or those Sony batteries when using the Atmos? I use these. This is the FX Lion Nano 1. We've been using these at trade shows for a while now. And the reason behind it is, so the FX Lion series, we have a couple of these. This is just the one that I have here. The Nano 1 has a USB-C PD port on it, so I can charge my camera and operate it while I'm using it, while also having that Dtap on the side, if I can open it, while also having the Dtap on the side. So with one piece, one battery, this is a 50 watt hour battery, I can power both my monitor and my camera pretty much for an entire shoot, and it works perfectly fine. The other nice thing is that all my GH6, if you've seen some of the previous streams, I have a small rig micro V-mount adapter plate that lets me, with 2 screws, mount it to any of the rigs that I'm using, and I can just click this thing on there. It's small, compact, lightweight, and it gets me through an entire day of shooting without having to worry about it. So I much prefer using these over the NPF style batteries that most monitors are default using as their power solution. Let's see here. Keith says, did Panasonic ask for the S1H or the GH6 to be Netflix approved? I honestly don't know. I'm not part of those conversations all the time. I believe we were approached for the S1H. I honestly don't know with the GH6. FC, have you heard of 32-bit float audio format before? It'd be awesome. 32-bit float is recorded into video since it has larger audio dynamic range. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of questions about 32-bit floating point. I don't know if cameras are ever going to have 32-bit built into it, honestly. The external recording devices seem to have that, kind of down packed, so I really don't know. We can keep asking. It is a question that Matt and I have both asked before. Yeah, that's about as much as I know about that stuff. I do know that it can be a better audio format, but yeah, it's just not deployed in, I don't think many, if any, cameras deploy it. But I could be wrong, so, it's always possible that I could be wrong about that one. So, let's see here. D Creative says, what is your process for editing raw photos from the S5? So it depends. If I'm going to be photographing and just kind of setting, kind of more casual shooting, I will bounce between using Lightroom or Capture One for my raw editing. I typically tend to be much more kind of general in the edit. So if you want something that's a quick turnaround, ACR or Adobe Camera Raw tends to be the faster way to get things done, especially since the color profiles that we use in the cameras are built into the software. So things like L Monochrome and L Classic Neo and stuff like that are built into the program for you to work with as a baseline for the Raw. But if you want to use things like Capture One, you'll probably want to profile your camera, per the shoot, just to make sure that you're getting the right, colors that you're looking for. So those are probably the best two programs. I've tried using some of the other ones, like what was mentioned before, and I've never really enjoyed using things like Darktable or Raw Therapy, stuff like that. Silky Pics to a point I'll use if I have to, but it's always hit or miss, depending on the programs. Cheekily asking, where's the Lumix S 18mm? It's coming, don't worry, it's coming. Derek Vision, what about a GH6S? We don't comment on speculation about future things, unfortunately. Even if we did know that kind of stuff, I wouldn't be able to talk about it, but yeah, no clue. Sorry. Let's see here. Talking about 32-bit. Okay. Andy says, I'm going to shoot a featured film using a GH6. I've been shooting the castings in ProRes FHD and scaling up to 4K. The image quality is absurdly good and super easy to edit. Yeah. ProRes, it's a really fun format to actually shoot in, especially if you've got a camera that has the general capabilities to work with it. For those that want to actually have a camera that has like the best image quality, that's one of the nice things with ProRes is that you've got very little to no noise reduction being applied to the image. So yes, ProRes does require more work in post, but you can get a much better image out of it if you are actually really working with it. So yeah, ProRes can be a really solid tool. And when you have a better meteor file to work with, that makes your post editing that much easier. So yeah, definitely stoked that you're using it. Cool. Let's see here. Adam says, any chance of live streaming? All the comments are, I know we probably lost a whole bunch of people from the stream there. So sorry for that, everybody. We will call this now, though, seeing how my phone is red hot from the heat. But yeah, this is one of the challenges, obviously, with the heat wave we've got going on across the board. This definitely seems to be a bit of a frustrating point. Let's see, does it look like we are coming back online? Let's see here. Hey, there we go. Yeah, so like I said, yeah, this heat wave has been crazy. I completely didn't even think about my phone, you know, being so used to working with our cameras and they just completely work. It's always been, you know, kind of the last thing you think of is a mobile device. But I want to make sure I answered that question from, I believe it was Keith that was asking it before. Streaming is using a 5G phone, so it's using my Galaxy S22 Ultra on 5G. You just, as we learned, you want to make sure that your phone doesn't sit in the sun as you're recording. As the sun moves, you don't want to let your phone sit too much in the sun because it will overheat and certain things will just stop working. But we are back right now, so I wanted to make sure I got that question answered. And then just double check through some of the rest of the questions. Thank you those that have been hanging in there. It's always fun doing these live streams when I'm not in a studio apartment that's air conditioned. It is hot, but you know, hey, the nice thing is that the system does auto reconnect after, you know, a signal's dropped. So as soon as the phone cooled down and we got that connection back, it immediately just kicked on and started streaming again. So let's give this another minute or so, see what other questions had come in while we were talking about this. Next project, okay, yeah, so that was the, okay. Maybe Panasonic should produce mobile phones. We did that for a while. They were actually pretty fun phones. Let's see here. Okay, here we were. Any chance? Okay, yeah. So, is any chance of live streaming on the GH5 making it to other cameras? It's going to be hit or miss. I believe that there is some hardware that is required to be able to do the wireless streaming. So, older cameras, I don't think so. Will ever get it. Newer cameras, I think that's a hit or miss thing. Depends on if it's designed with that in mind or not, and whether or not that equipment and hardware that can support the wireless live streaming or the USB tethered streaming, which is what we're doing today, can work. Future cameras, there's always a possibility. The more people ask for it, the more likely we are to potentially add it in and develop around it in the future. Let's see here. Dan, can I use my Panasonic Lumix full-frame lenses for your S5 on your GH5? Unfortunately not. The flange distance is too close to allow both the lens mounts, the lens and then the mount to actually kind of match up for the proper flange back distance. So, unfortunately not. And the other way around, since it's 20 millimeter versus 19.75 on micro four thirds, one would have to sit in the lens mount. The other one just doesn't have enough space for the actual distance there. Let's see here. The other comment there, Keith, not a Lumix camera, but Panasonic CX350 can live stream out of the camera. Yeah, so we do have camcorders. The CX350 can do it. I believe it's the X1 can do it as well, or actually the X2000 can do it. So there are camcorders that can do this kind of live streaming as well. So, all right, cool. With that, we are going to probably call this before my phone decides to just not want to allow me to do this anymore. Actually, I'll answer this last one before we round it. Andy says, could you explain your exact setup right now? How is the live streaming process working on the GH5 Mark II? Does the GH6 have the same thing? Can't remember. So the GH5 Mark II, the camera that we're using, is connected with USB to my Galaxy S22 Ultra that has USB tethering turned on. So it's using my 5G mobile hotspot or my tethering functionality on my mobile device. I used the Lumix Network software, which is a Windows-based software. I think still it's only Windows-based. That lets me import a stream setup file onto a memory card that has the stream key and the URL, plug that into the camera, load that file, and that tells the camera where the stream feed needs to go. I set the camera up in this case because I knew we were potentially going to have maybe some slight issues with networking. I have it at a 1080 30 frames per second, 3 megabit per second stream, so not our normal 60 frames. Set that up, connect it through the mobile device so that it uses that hotspot. And then the only other thing I'm doing is I'm using my laptop here to monitor chat on YouTube and then just trigger the streaming functionality. So given that we just dropped again because the phone is getting a little too hot, I'm going to call it at that today. So thank you everybody for the awesome questions and the awesome back and forth. These things are so much fun to do, and I'm glad we were able to get out and do it outside despite the mobile device We will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, back in the studio in the air conditioning with a reliable network connection. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay cool if you have to be working outside or you're traveling or anything like that. And yeah, hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. And yeah, looking forward to talking to you all next Thursday at 2